Thanks. Let me just. Sorry, I was muted. I'm just going to show a few slides to start with and then show you a preview of the app. So let me just sort out sharing my screen. Oops. Okay, can you all see my slides okay?
Yeah, I can see them.
Okay, cool. So yeah, I'm Aislinn and I am in my second year of my PhD at the Birkbeck CBCD. I am in the GEL lab, which is a Genes and Environment Laboratory with Professor Angelica Ronald. And I'm also doing an industrial PhD, which means you have a kind of industrial placement during your PhD. And in my PhD, it's more of a collaboration rather than a placement, even though I do work within the company as well. So the industrial collaborator out here are Mindwave, who are kind of digital design and app design company based in London, and they do lots of health related apps. They work a lot with NHS trusts and also work quite closely with academic partners as well, developing lots of different types of research apps, which is why we decided to collaborate with them. So I'm going to give you a little kind of brief kind of introduction about what the app is looking at and how it works before going through to the preview of the app. So the kind of idea behind that app was initially just kind of considering the kind of massive amount of variability that is seen in infants' motor development. So when we talk about motor development, we're talking about the movements, and here you can see their gross motor milestones. So gross means kind of large, big movements. So you've got, for example, earlier on, things like being able to lift your head, all the way up to rolling, sitting, crawling, and then one of the final major ones is walking. Now, I think this was based on a big study by the WHO, the World Health Organization, which found there's great variability in the achievement of these milestones. So when infants first actually are seen to reach these milestones. So for example, walking is between 10 and 16 months. So it's quite a kind of wide range of age of acquisition there. So they're one of the things we wanted to try and capture in the app. So the problem with current methods is they rely quite heavily on parents remembering past events. Unless parents have been kind of recording the specific date their child meets these kind of milestones, it's quite tricky for parents to remember, especially if they've got multiple infants at the same time. Or it requires kind of infants going in for clinical kind of assessment with a doctor, which obviously, you know, has its limitations in people being able to go in to these settings, especially in times like COVID pandemics. So another thing we wanted to look at was you've got the kind of variability in the age that they actually reach these things, but also there's kind of a transition between them. So if there are any parents in this call, I think they probably will remember if they had, if their children have reached milestones yet, that it's not a simple kind of transition from one to the next. So for example, between crawling and walking, infants don't instantly start walking one day and continue walking for the rest for their future. Quite often there's a transition period where they're trying out, testing where's best to walk and gaining confidence until you can see here eventually Let me just get my Bella cursor for this. Eventually, yeah, that here you can see that they've decided they're going to walk continuously. So when it goes down here, you can see that they've decided to go back into crawling and then start walking again. So this is something that is quite hard to capture in kind of the typical methods that you get at the moment. So it is something that we think that could be captured in an app, which is easy for parents to kind of record information in. So yeah, we're developing a smartphone app where parents can enter information about their infant's motor development. This is a kind of initial idea for the kind of front screen of the app, but we'll show you more in a minute. There's going to be 4 main modes, which I'm going to present to you in a moment too. But just to give you kind of background and kind of why we're doing this. So like I kind of mentioned, it gives you, the idea is it will give you a more accurate idea of the typical variation in infancy. So we're looking at getting a more accurate idea of the time that infants starting these specific milestones, and also these transition periods that I mentioned. And also allows these things to be measured from home. So that has 2 benefits. So the parents and the family don't have to travel into a clinical setting. So that's quite beneficial at the moment, but also I'll go on to explain that the idea is that parents will upload videos of their infants, and there's a lot of evidence to show that infants behave very differently at home to laboratory environments. So it will give us a much more kind of realistic picture of their infant's motor development in their home environment. It also starts to give us an idea of if early signs of this motor development and these kind of achievement of motor milestones is indicating of later disorders such as ADHD and ASD. So there's a lot of evidence to show that you can see delays in infants who go on to develop these disorders, but it's quite heavily, there's quite a lot of problems related to the issues I mentioned earlier in terms of the measurement of these. So once we have a tool that is a more kind of accurate measurement of these kind of skills early on, then hopefully it will give an idea to the association with later disorders. So hopefully I've given you a kind of brief kind of background to why we're creating the app and what it's looking at. And I mentioned 4 modes earlier. So the first mode the app would do is where the parent can scroll through lots of milestones. And I will show you how this works in a moment. And select the one they want to enter information about, and then enter the information, for example, when they achieved that milestone. This can basically be done in the same way, but through a calendar. So they can select a date and then select a milestone. And here you can also see if they've reached a specific milestone or not. For example, on the 8th, they reached a milestone, as well as the 3rd. Yeah. And as I mentioned, we want to look at this kind of transition between milestones. So the idea, the benefits of using something like an app is you can have a kind of flexible measurement. So for example, if you've just gone through here and then clicked on crawling, it will then say, okay, now you're going to get some daily questions to ask you if your infant is crawling on a daily basis. So you just say yes or no. So you'll get one of those notifications coming up on your phone. For example, did you see James crawling today? And you literally just say yes or no, or unable to observe. And then this will give you this feedback of the kind of transition between crawling and not crawling. But like I said, I will show you more detail in a minute. And the last mode is uploading infants' and videos of infants' activity and motor skills. So this is where we can ask parents at specific periods, so either specific ages of the infant, or even at transition point, for example, when they've just started walking, and we'll get a much more kind of reliable kind of picture of the infant's motor skills at that point, and also look at their kind of activity in certain videos as well, and we'll be able to code their activity and compare between infants. So I can answer questions now, or I can go straight through to the preview of the app, depending on if people have questions or not.
Let's do the preview.
Okay, cool. So I will just switch what I'm sharing. Okay. Just check this works. Yep. Okay, so this will be, well, this is one kind of idea for the front of the screen. We've got different ideas for the name and the logo, which I can show you at the end and get any feedback from everyone of what they think. But like I said, there's lots of different modes of the app. We've got the milestones and the calendar modes. I haven't said much about the reports or the questionnaires yet, but I can tell you more about those in a minute. And then this activity where you can upload a video. So I can show you an example for adding information about a milestone. So here I've got an example of a parent who has 2 infants, James and Elizabeth. So you can have 2 profiles as part of the app, and when you want to enter information, it will ask you which infant you want to add information about. And obviously you can add in pictures of them, so it makes it a bit more personalized. So here it's asking you what type of milestone you want to add information about. So it gives you a little reminder. So I mentioned gross motor milestones earlier. So those are big movements such as walking, but you can also have fine motor milestones, such as small hand movements like grasping a pencil and things like that. So if you wanted to add information about a gross motor milestone, you'll click on that. And then here's also the image that you can add into it. So like I said, it personalizes the app a bit more and makes it nice to use. And then you can scroll through and look at the milestones. So the ones that are filled in are the ones that have been completed, and the ones that aren't, you can just see the outline, aren't. So, and then you can also search for a milestone down here. So if you wanted to add information about crawling, you do click on crawling and you can get more information about it here, and click observe, and then you can add the date. So example, click on the 24th. And this is what I mentioned earlier, where you can, it will then give you a reminder to say that now you've mentioned that the infant is crawling. You get a kind of daily notification asking if James was crawling each day for a certain amount of period, say 10 days. What I haven't mentioned about the app so far is that there's a kind of sharing export function. So this is where you can celebrate your kind of child's achievements, and you'll get a little kind of screen that you can then export and send to people. So we're trying to make the app as enjoyable to use and fun to use, so to try and engage users to keep on using it. I go, oops, back. There's also the calendar mode. So this is where you can add more milestones or see the milestones already achieved. So for example, on the 3rd of May, they achieved the milestone of sitting aided. So where the infant is able to sit up with the help of the parent. So you can either go and look at that milestone that's already been observed. Or add another milestone, and it will go back into the same mode as before. So the reports are also another thing that the parent can get out of the app. So you can look at the activity, the daily questions reports from your child. So this is whether they were being able to sit aided each day or crawling each day. And you can also get a little report on their kind of milestone highlights as well. So for example, this is showing their first milestone, how many farm motor milestones they've had, their most recent milestone, for example. So this is something you could also just share with friends and family as well. There'll also be questionnaires as part of the app. So there'll be questions about from the for the parent about them and their home life, and about each separate infant as well. So you'll just click on that and be able to answer the question within the app. And this is where parents will upload videos of their infants. So these will be videos that have already been uploaded, and then we'll be able to record a new video there, which hasn't quite been designed yet. And that's mostly it that I can remember. Yeah, does anyone have any questions?
Thank you, Aislinn. That's really interesting. Such a cool use of technology as well. I have some questions, but does anyone else have any before I plow in? I was just wondering, well, I have lots of questions, but in sort of incentivizing parents to do this, one thing that was striking me as you were going through it, and it's something you mentioned earlier, is that for my firstborn, I can remember a lot more of the milestones than I can for my second child, just because, I don't know, I don't know if I was more engaged or she was the only one, so I remembered it. And so now, and kids do ask every now and then, like, oh, how old was I when I crawled, or how old was I when I walked, or how old was I when I whatever. And for my first one, again, I can remember. The second one, I tend to just make it up because I don't remember anymore. So if you had something like this app, in a way, it's like this really amazing modern photo album that, especially if you're uploading pictures or videos, it kind of tells you when all of these things happened, which is probably really fun for the kids or the babies to see once they become children and they're sort of more interested in stuff like that. But then that also leads me to sort of a more like data protection thing. And I saw a screen of that flashed up just now. But if a parent uploads a video, would you then, as the researcher, have immediate access to that, or are there, or the photos as well? I mean, what data are you sort of mining from this?
Yeah, I'm discussing actually, yeah, the kind of data protection side of that with someone in IT at the moment. I think the idea was, so initially the parent will upload the video and be able to preview the video before they upload it to the app. And we haven't quite decided. I think we have to decide whether we want to just purely code the information on a certain server and then not keep any of the information. So the videos will just stay in the person's app for their use and not ours. But yeah, we're still kind of undecided about the exact process there. But yeah, we're kind of aware that there's a lot of issues that we'll need to think through.
Definitely, but it's got so much potential. It's really interesting. And then the other thing I was wondering about is, especially in the current sort of technological age, that parents are, especially when it's their first one, you know, you're constantly comparing how your baby's doing to other babies. And obviously, as we know as researchers, there's a huge range in terms of what's normal for when you might lift your head or start crawling or whatever that milestone might be. And so are there sort of built-in, not like a safety net, but something to sort of reassure parents that, you know, it's okay that, you know, your James hasn't done this yet, or if they're worried about it, is there a way of asking, I don't know, what a normal range is or something?
Yeah, so I think the focus is, yeah, to not talk about kind of normal ranges. Like I mentioned, obviously there's so much variability anyway in typical development. I think with the idea that we'll kind of try and focus that. So I think we'll provide quite a lot of information when people sign up, just to say, we're just interested in that, in their infant's development. There's not, yeah, there's wide variability involved, and just a lot of people have kind of suggested kind of adding kind of in terms of the reports and stuff, like comparing it to typical development and things. So I've focused on the reports and just focusing on the individual rather than kind of comparing it to kind of typical development for the same reason. But yeah, I think I probably do need to kind of add in a few more reminders, like as people are adding information into the app, just to say, yeah, don't worry if you think your infant's not achieving certain milestones, because I've seen kind of similar types of apps, and they are quite pushy in a way that they're like, well, this milestone is typically achieved in these months, blah 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 blah. So I'm trying to stay away from that kind of perspective.
Yeah, that makes sense. Does anyone else have any questions?
Would it be possible to have like two parents having access to the same profile, if you see what I mean? So like I saw you could add two infants. Could you have both parents also sort of within the same profile?
Yeah, I haven't actually thought about doing that. I'll have to talk to the app people and see how easy that would be. So I guess it would just mean the data would be kept on a server and both apps would access the same data. So it's definitely doable, but I'll have to ask them how easy it would be to do. But yeah, it's a good point. Like, I'm definitely not oriented this app around just mothers. I think both mothers and fathers can use the app. So obviously it will be quite useful if both parents have it. Definitely, I'll take that into account. I also have, shall I show you some different examples of the logo and names and see what people think of the different logos? We're trying to decide at the moment which ones are best, so it'd be quite good to see which ones people like. So, as well as the one I've already showed you, these are different examples of the logo and of home screen of the app. So the idea of the circles are to kind of indicate the milestones. So as they get darker, they indicate kind of later achieved milestones. Did anyone have any preferred logos or names? So we've got momentum, Babmo, so like baby motor, or step up.
I like the ones on the left, momentum and step up.
Yeah, I like those ones too. I was going to say, I'm not a parent though, so.
It's hard. Every time I ask, everyone has a kind of different perspective. So momentum has obviously different meanings and it's quite a long word, but I came up with momentum. So I still quite like it.
I like momentum too. Aislinn, I was just thinking more about what, I'm sorry I didn't catch the name, that the lady had raised about having functionality for two parents to access the same app, and like thinking it through, I wonder if it shouldn't be limited to two, like if you could make it more, just because, you know, I don't know if a grandparent was looking after the baby, or maybe they wouldn't want to engage in this, or if they had a carer or a nanny, just so that other people could contribute. Like if the parent was really intent on getting it, you know, of uploading all that data, then they might want to always be able to upload it rather than it just be fixed on one person.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I wonder if we could have like an online version, so you could just open it up in your browser. So maybe like a more basic version, if you just enter the account details, and you can just open up in your browser on your phone, as well as using the app. Yeah, that'll be definitely something I'll talk to the app developers about introducing, definitely.
You might end up with some sad parents who missed the first crawl because the nanny saw it though.
Yeah. Well, even if the nanny saw it and they believe the nanny, they could just add it in themselves.
I'm a nursery teacher, and if ever we see the first steps at nursery, we never tell the parent. We say, you know, they're really, really close. I think this weekend they're probably going to walk, like look out for it, so that they kind of get it first.
That's really lovely. That's so nice you do that.
Yeah, can I ask a question, please?
Yeah.
As a grandmother to this, I would be really interested. I think this is a brilliant idea. What I'd like to know, though, is, are you going to develop this app for a wider audience? And how are you going to inform parents that it's actually there for everybody? Or is it just for research of the people that you know? Because obviously, the wider the audience, the better the information that you get.
Absolutely, yeah. So during my PhD, the idea is to develop the app and test its what we call kind of validity, so how useful it is compared to other measures. So we're going to compare it against parental questionnaires sent out to parents, and hopefully compare it to kind of in-person assessments with infants. And then during my PhD, hopefully show that it's kind of a useful tool. And if so, we'll use that to get more funding to kind of make it a widely available resource. And it'll just be openly available on app stores, and I guess advertised through kind of parenting websites and groups, etc. But yeah, the first hurdle is kind of making it and showing its usefulness, basically.
Well, I think it's brilliant. I would have used it many decades ago. So I think it's a great resource for parents to have. And it's so great a resource that I would think the wider audience that you can get, and the more you can feed into, I don't know, midwives and health visitors and all that type of stuff, the better.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it could easily be shared with clinicians working with the child. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
No problem.
When do you think like the first version of the app will be ready for testing?
It's a good question. We're actually at the moment seeking extra funding to actually build the app. So actually in the middle of doing that now. We're in the kind of the later stages of a grant process, getting that extra funding. So I'm going through the design process with our partners. So it's kind of getting ready to go, but then the actual building of the app is quite expensive. So it's, as always, things are reliant on money. But if we do get the money within 6 months, yeah, hopefully, fingers crossed.
Aislinn, do you want to stop the screen share so we can see everyone?
Sorry, Aislinn, I have a question, if that's all right. The app looks great. Yeah, it's looking really good. I'm just more curious about kind of once you have people using it and you have some data coming in and stuff, what's the first kind of thing you're gonna look at with the data? Are you kind of looking to see how reliable? I don't know. I guess, yeah, I'm just interested what you're gonna do when you have the data coming in and stuff from it.
Yeah, so we're hoping, depending on when we can get it built, is to do 1 year study. So we're going to get infants from kind of 3 months all the way up to 12 months. So have a mixture of ages actually using the app to kind of cover different developmental periods, and then have a longitudinal study. Sorry, there's let me just close this door. There's some loud work happening.
Back at the Babylab.
That's better. They're doing some work outside. So yeah, a year longitudinal study. And while that's happening, we're going to be doing reliability assessments. So do repeated measurements kind of a week apart and checking the reliability. So if we get similar measures at different time points, we're going to do a validity assessment, like I mentioned before, so compare it against parental questionnaires and in-lab assessments, and hopefully also do some longitudinal modelling, so to look at different what we call trajectories of development. So if there's any infants who are using the app have kind of persistently kind of delayed trajectories of motor development, and compare that to kind of early infant traits for things like ADHD and autism. But obviously we're using just a normal kind of community sample, so we don't expect many of them to have any kind of, most of them won't kind of go on to get things like autism and ADHD, but that's kind of one thing we're going to have a look at.
Any more questions, or should we finish up? As I'm not seeing any babies or children with us, I will not subject you to the brilliant, cheesy, walking, talking, singing song that, oh, is there one?
I can see one, yeah.
Oh, sorry. Okay, well, let's play the song then. If you don't want to listen, that's absolutely fine, but please join us again next week, where we will have another one of our PhD students, Olat, and I believe she'll be talking about her research with babies and children with Down syndrome. And also, please remember that on our website, CBCD, at, what is it? Well, our website, the Babylab, Birkbeck Babylab, we have a whole section dedicated to our online research, and there's something for all ages from newborns through to teenagers. So please have a look at our offerings. We even have a study that's just taking parental opinion about all the data that you're being asked to share. So again, please look at our online studies. I hope to see you next week, and I will finish off